Hey lads, today we're stepping into the cold, salt-bitten world of medieval pirates. The sea is blacker than ink, the air sharp enough to cut wool, the waves pounding the hull like fists demanding tribute. You can almost smell the pitch, rancid fish oil, and the sweat of men who haven't felt a hearth in months. Here, food isn't luxury. It's a daily prayer whispered to an indifferent ocean. Standing on that ice-crusted deck, you'd be amazed how fast the stomach forgets comfort. You probably wouldn't survive. Most didn't. But the ones who did, those strange, cunning, half-starved sea wolves, learned a kind of endurance that feels almost alien to us now. So before you settle in, hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely love what I'm doing here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, draw a slow breath, and listen to the ship groan all around you. The winter North Sea is a gray, endless expanse. The horizon melts into fog, the cold sinks so deep into your bones you stop noticing it. Deck planks creak beneath boots stiffened with frost. Every movement slows. Everyone moves the same way now, Dutchmen, Bretons, Moors, Englishmen, all wearing the same hollow, hungry stare. Supplies are running low, barrels half empty, salt pork already reeks of death. The wind lashes your face while you haul rope and think only one thing: what's left to eat? The ship's cook, a wiry man whose beard has frozen into icicles, mutters that rations must be stretched. The word ration tastes bitter. You count crumbs, scrape barrel bottoms, and trade insults too weary to sting. Historians love pointing out that pirates weren't the mindless gluttons of legend. They planned, calculated, stored food with military precision. Every hardtack, every salt fish was accounted for. Yet the ocean had its own plans. Leaks spoiled flour. Salt soaked up moisture and turned to stone. Meat, no matter how well packed, eventually rotted. One night, when the moon glimmers through ragged clouds, you sit by the galley hatch listening to the cook curse under his breath. The cauldron barely simmers. The smell is vague, stew or punishment, hard to tell. He lifts the lid, pokes the contents, and grumbles, still better than snow. Do you think of home, fresh bread from the oven, ale that doesn't taste of iron? Home now feels like someone else's half-finished tale. The only warmth left is memory. By dawn, frost has painted every rope white. The sea is unnervingly calm, as if waiting. You climb to the foredeck and stare into the silence. Hunger does strange things. You've seen a deckhand lick frost from the mast to wet his throat, seen another chew old leather, pretending it's jerked beef. The ocean whispers a cold lullaby beneath the keel. The historian still alive in your head, if you can still think, reminds you, food wasn't just sustenance for pirates. It was power. Captains who fed their crews well-bought loyalty. Those who failed risked mutiny. The sea forgave no weakness, and neither did men. Scholars still argue how organized these floating societies really were, anarchic gangs of thieves or disciplined fleets bound by necessity. The truth probably drifts somewhere in between. You look at the faces around you, sunken eyes, cracked lips, hands trembling from cold, and realize survival has its own order. You scrape your bowl clean, though it held barely a spoonful. The cook ladles something that might once have been peas and is now gray-green mush. He sighs. "We'll be here till we're bones." You nod, too tired to answer. The taste is bland, but at least it's warm. The captain paces the deck, boots tapping softly, breath clouding. He's always thinking, how to stretch what's left, where to hunt, where to steal. You can almost hear the plans grinding in his head. Somewhere beyond the ice lie merchant ships heavy with grain and salt beef. Somewhere warmth still exists. You remember tales of brighter days, rum, grilled fish on sun-drenched decks. Now the sky is rust-colored iron, and every breath feels like surrender. You pull your cloak tighter, trying not to think about the gnawing inside. The sailor beside you quietly hums an ancient tune, so old it might predate the language you speak. A lullaby from his homeland, hearths, bread, full bellies. You close your eyes for a moment and almost taste the sweetness of barley. Then a wave slams the hull and reality drags you back. Your fingers are numb. Your lips crack when you smile, though you're not sure why you're smiling. Maybe because, in some strange way, the suffering feels shared. You are part of something, a frozen brotherhood of need, and in that there is an odd peace. The day drags on. The sun never truly rises, only glows weakly behind clouds and fog. You notice gulls circling far off, too far to mean land. Someone mutters that gulls always find dying ships first. Someone else laughs, though it isn't funny. When night falls again, the cook calls for supper, though no one hurries. The smell is the same: boiled salt pork and hardtack softened in water. It's barely food, yet you eat it slowly, reverently, as if this tasteless stew holds a promise. The historian's voice in your mind whispers that for many of these men, meals were the last thread to sanity. Eating, however grim, anchored the day, gave rhythm to survival. Even now, centuries later, archaeologists find pottery shards, fish bones, barley grains in wrecks, tiny ghosts of meals that once kept men alive. Lying on deck wrapped in a damp, smoke-and brine-smelling blanket, you think of all those forgotten suppers. You wonder how many times the same sky has watched the same hunger. Somewhere in the dark the captain whispers a prayer, not to God but to the sea. Half asleep, you listen as cold drowns everything but the slow beat of your heart. You drift between dreams of hearthlight and the sound of distant waves. The ship creaks, the wind moans, and hunger curls beside you like a quiet companion. Night thickens, turning the deck into a sheet of glass. You wake with salt frozen in your hair and the smell of smoke hanging in the air. Down below, the cook is already coaxing life from the last scraps of fuel. You follow the thin trail of warmth down the ladder, boots slipping on icy steps, feeling the ship rock beneath your weight, like a living creature shaking off its dreams. Salt, smoke, and despair. Your morning companions. Every scent in the galley tells a story of preservation, of men wrestling time. You can almost see it in the barrels lined along the wall, packed with salt fish, chunks of beef, pale cakes of suet. Each one a small victory over decay, yet none guaranteed. The very air is damp. The salt meant to preserve slowly drinks moisture, turning slick, then useless. You sit on an upturned crate while the cook stirs something that might once have been meat. He glances back and gives the grin that hides defeat. "If this doesn't kill us," he says, "it'll at least keep us alive." You laugh quietly, though your stomach knots at the smell. Preserving food at sea was an art. Pirates borrowed tricks from merchants and navies alike. Meat went into brine strong enough to burn the tongue, fish was smoked black. The result could survive months in the hold, though it tasted of little but endurance. You bite into the tough salt strip he offers. It's like chewing wood soaked in seawater. Still, you swallow. Historians often note that salt was the most precious cargo aboard these ships, more valuable than gold in winter. Without it, survival became a race against time. Some captains paid dearly for the purest salt from Iberian mines. Others boiled down seawater and lived with the bitter aftertaste. The sea has a cruel sense of humor. Sometimes barrels burst in storms, flooding stores and ruining everything. Then came smoking, small fires on deck beneath iron pans, drying strips of meat and fish until the air filled with haze that clung to every breath. Smoke got into clothes, hair, even dreams. You watch the cook rub his eyes with the back of a soot-blackened hand. Smoked is better than spoiled, he mutters, tossing a handful of coarse salt into the pot. The sound is sharp, like hail on tin. The smell is worse, but at least it's warm. One curious fact from surviving logs: when spices ran out, some pirates seasoned their rations with gunpowder. Absurd, yes, but the potassium nitrate gave a faint sharp kick, a tiny spark of flavor in food that otherwise tasted like damp rope. You picture the taste and almost laugh, thinking how hunger turns men into strange experimenters. Scholars still debate whether saltpeter was ever used as a real preservative or just a dare among the desperate. Records are fragmentary, stories half-true, but you can imagine it, can't you? A circle of shivering sailors daring each other to spice supper with something meant to explode. You chew another piece, trying to ignore the sting of salt on cracked lips. The cook quietly hums a tune from the Breton coast. For a moment the galley feels less like a coffin and more like a hearth. Smoke drifts around you, soft and familiar, wrapping you in something close to comfort. Above, the wind howls through the rigging. You climb up after eating. Low gray sky presses close. The cold feels sharper now that you're briefly warm. On the main deck, men haul barrels, check lines, pretending they're not thinking about food. The sea has turned dull green, thick with drifting ice. Somewhere a gull cries, the sound slicing silence like a knife. You stare at the horizon and wonder how much the human body can endure. Pirates of the frozen Baltic or the English Channel all shared one truth: hunger was the hardest enemy. You can fight storms, outwit fleets, even cheat the hangman, but hunger never lets go. It seeps into your bones, wears down your mind until even the taste of salt becomes a kind of comfort. Old sailors whispered a superstition: the sea watches those who waste food, who spill a grain of salt, who toss a bone overboard without respect. And the ocean remembers. You don't laugh at that belief here. You tip your bowl carefully over the side, whispering something you don't quite believe, just in case. Smoke still clings to your clothes. Your fingers smell of brine. You rub them together and watch salt flakes glitter like frost in the gray light. Down below, the cook starts singing again, low, hoarse notes echoing through the timbers. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it lull you, and realize that salt and smoke aren't just tools of survival. They are the taste of the age itself. The wind shifts. You hear sails strain, ropes groan under tension. The ship moves with new purpose, as if the sea has finally remembered you exist. Ahead, the horizon darkens, storm or promise, impossible to tell. You draw a deep breath. The air tastes of iron, salt, and distant land. Standing there, you understand that every bite taken aboard this ship is an act of rebellion. Every salty scrap, every smoky swallow defies the sea's attempt to claim you. Though your belly aches and your fingers shake, there is pride in the defiance. Night will come soon, fires will burn again, the same bitter smell will rise from the galley. But right now you stand into the wind and let the salt sting your lips, feeling alive, if only for a moment. Morning arrives quiet but brutal. Cold presses against your skin as you wake to the creak of timbers and the low moan of taut ropes. The sea is still a vast mirror of gray reflecting nothing. Hunger gnaws inside you, and you already dread what will be served. Someone says the word hardtack, and the mere sound makes your jaw ache. Hardtack. The infamous ship's biscuit lies stacked in canvas sacks by the galley. It's barely bread anymore, after a month at sea, more like slabs of baked stone, pale and pocked, punched with holes to keep it from rising. The cook calls them tooth testers. You tap one on the table, it rings like wood. It smells faintly of dust and salt. Logs from English and Dutch ships describe these biscuits as able to last years if kept dry. Cheap, tough, utterly joyless, made of flour, water, sometimes a trace of salt, baked twice until every drop of moisture vanished. Immortal, yes, but scarcely edible. You bite and feel the edges scrape your gums. To soften it, the cook advises soaking in ale or seawater. You choose ale. It turns the bread to mush, though it still smells faintly of mold. Sailors joked that hardtack was both food and weapon depending on how you threw it. You picture the deck full of starving men hurling biscuits at rats, laughing through cracked lips. Oddly, several logs record men carving names or symbols into their biscuits, tiny talismans before eating. Maybe a claim of ownership in a world where nothing belonged to you. Or maybe it helped forget what they were actually chewing. You take another piece and try not to think of worms. Yes, worms. They came with the flour or crawled in later when damp crept through seams. Sailors called them weevils, though they were beetle larvae. They writhed in dim light when you broke the biscuit open. Tiny pale bodies squirming before you crushed them with your thumb. Some joked it was extra protein. Others pretended not to see. A curious note from a Spanish navigator's journal tells how crews tapped biscuits on the table to shake out insects before eating. The sound of hundreds tapping their food became part of sea life's rhythm, like wind or creaking rope. Tap, 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 then silence while everyone chewed. Experts disagree whether hardtack was truly tolerable on long voyages or simply the lesser evil. Some maritime historians claim flour was sometimes mixed with ground peas or beans for flavor. Others insist it only hastened rot. You imagine the debate, one scholar defending pea flour, another shaking his head over moldy crumbs. Either way, hardtack remained the cruel staple that defined centuries of sea life. The cook sits beside you, fingers red from cold. He grins, showing the gap where a tooth used to be. Lost it to hardtack, he says. You can't tell if he's joking, maybe both. He dips his piece in weak broth and eats without complaint. You do the same, letting dull warmth slide down your throat. They say even pirates who lived beyond nations' laws honored one rule: never waste food. Every crumb was earned. Even if it crawled, even if it tasted like rope, you ate it, because tomorrow there might be nothing. Later, when the sun struggles through cloud, you join the others on deck. Air bites your face, ropes crusted with rime, gulls trailing the ship like pale ghosts. A young sailor jokes the gulls probably eat better than we do. This time no one laughs. For a moment you stare at the horizon. You crave not just food but texture, taste, the feeling of something alive. The sea offers nothing but cold air and memory. You wonder how many before you bit the same hard biscuit and thought the same thought. That is the taste of survival. Deep in the hold rats scurry. Men pretend not to notice, but they know what's coming. When rations run out, rats become both enemy and meal. The line between disgust and necessity blurs fast at sea. You glance toward the hatch and shudder. A strange entry in a Danish captain's log describes a winter when the crew ground hardtack to powder, mixed it with seawater and whale oil, and made a kind of paste. They called it sailor's pudding. The description alone turns your stomach, yet the captain wrote it kept men on their feet. That was enough. You feel the ship rock gently, icy water slapping the hull. The sound is steady as breathing. You chew another piece of biscuit, more from habit than hunger, and let the sea's rhythm swallow the noise. For a moment it almost feels peaceful. Cold wind whistles through the rigging again. You pull your cloak tighter. Crumbs fall into the wool folds. The sea stretches endless and wide before you, gray and vast, and somewhere beneath that surface lies the promise of warmer days. You look at the stillful sack of hardtack and feel strange gratitude. They're awful, yes, but they exist. And in a world where the difference between life and death is one meal, even suffering can be mercy. The sea moans tonight like a living thing. You sit by the galley fire, what there is of it, watching thin flames lick the edges of a blackened pot. The air smells faintly of yeast, sweat, and smoke. Around you men clutch their cups as if warmth itself might slip away if they loosen their grip. The cook hums softly while stirring something that bubbles gently in the gloom. What he's brewing isn't quite ale, something weaker, rougher. A fermented mix of water, barley scraps, and whatever sweetness could be scavenged. They call it small beer. It slakes thirst and keeps sickness at bay, at least for a while. Chroniclers of the time often noted medieval sailors trusted small beer more than water, considering it cleaner, safer, almost medicinal. And they weren't wrong. Fresh water went foul in days, but alcohol, even in tiny amounts, kept it from rotting. You sip from your cup and feel the sour bite. It burns a little, but in this cold, even bitterness feels like luxury. A few men chuckle quietly as warmth reaches them. The youngest wipes his mouth and sighs. If only it were stronger, I might forget how cold I am. The cook snorts. You'd forget how to stand, too. Still, the beer is precious. It lifts spirits more than it fills bellies, and men know it. When grain ran low, they brewed from pine needles or dried herbs soaked in hot water. One curious record from a Hanseatic merchant ship mentions CT brewed with lemon zest and garlic. The crew swore it kept the cold from their bones. Some researchers doubt those strange brews truly prevented illness or simply gave men something to believe in. Faith in a cup can be stronger than chemistry. Yet one cup of faith can carry you through a night like this. The cook ladles stew into rough bowls, each portion the same cloudy gray. The smell is thick, salt, and boiled fat. You dip your spoon, watching pale chunks drift. Fish, pork, maybe both. The line between meat and memory has blurred. You bring it to your lips anyway. It tastes of smoke and sea. According to old logs, galley stew was never the same twice. It was whatever had been preserved. Soft dried onions, dried peas, biscuit crumbs for thickening. In desperate times, even sawdust found its way in. The cook called it sea flour. You swallow carefully, hoping tonight isn't one of those nights. One odd detail from a privateer's journal tells of a winter when whale oil was added to soup for calories. The result was revolting but filling. He wrote the stench haunted the crew for months, yet not a drop was left. You picture the greasy sheen, the involuntary gratitude that followed. The stew warms your stomach slowly, evenly, like a small fire spreading through frozen wood. Voices soften around you. Someone hums a lullaby in a tongue you do know. It drifts through the air like smoke. No one speaks of hunger directly. They talk around it with humor or memory. One man recalls a feast years ago, mother's butter-heavy bread. Another describes oranges so bright they seem to glow. You listen quietly, letting pictures replace the taste in your mouth. An old sailor by the door taps his spoon against his bowl and begins a story. He claims there once was a captain who brewed beer so strong it caught fire. He used it to light the ship's lanterns when oil ran out. You laugh, suspecting myth. Still, in the dim light, every man smiles at the thought of flame born from drink. Academics still debate whether pirates brewed their own or relied entirely on captured stocks. Some evidence suggests small fermenting barrels were kept even on fast raiders. If true, brewing like music or prayer, was part of survival's rhythm, something steady to count the days by. You stare into your cup. Firelight dances on the surface, golden in the gloom. It reminds you of home, though you no longer remember which one. Cold has taken that too. Outside, a storm rises again. Wind howls through the rigging. Someone lashes the galley door shut. The cook just shrugs and mutters, "Let it scream, it can't get in." You smile at that, a small spark of warmth unrelated to food. The stew pot is empty now. Men scrape their bowls, licking the last traces from the sides. The sound is quiet, reverent. When you've lived so long without plenty, even scraps feel sacred. The cook wipes his hands and sighs. "That's all for today." He pauses, looking around the room. "Dream of roast chicken if you like, it costs nothing." You stand and stretch, joints stiff from cold. The weak beer gurgles in your belly, softening the edges of the world. The ship heels slightly, rocking you toward the ladder. Up top, the wind whistles through the rigging again. You climb slowly, cup in hand, trying not to spill what little warmth remains. When you reach the deck, the world is pure gray. The sea glows faintly in moonlight broken only by thin lines of white foam. You finish the last of the beer and close your eyes. The taste is faint now, almost gone, but it lingers like memory. Bitter, smoky, alive. For a moment the cold retreats. You exhale, watching your breath drift away like fog and feel, impossibly, a little less alone. By dawn the storm has passed, leaving the deck slick with ice and silence. The air is so clean it hurts to breathe. You step out, boots crunching on frozen ropes, tasting faint metallic brine, salty, cold, almost sharp. Down below, the cook is counting what remains. A few sacks of peas, a dwindling barrel of salt pork, little else. Hunger waits quietly in the corners, patient and certain. Today the captain sends a small party ashore. The ice is thick enough to bear weight, and somewhere along that white horizon there might be food. You volunteer without thinking, driven by the dull ache in your gut. The longboat groans as it's lowered. Men climb in, clutching spears, nets, crude hooks. The sea laps gently at the hull, every sound a reminder of distance. The shoreline ahead is sharp with rock and snow. Your breath clouds as you drag the boat across shallow ice. Every noise carries, the scrape of oars, the crunch of boots, the whisper of wind across empty land. The world here feels hollow. Contemporary letters from coastal villages mention seeing such parties in winter. Ragged men combing shores for crabs, seaweed, or wreck salvage. They weren't always recognized as pirates, sometimes lost sailors, sometimes starving fishermen, but hunger gave them away. You crouch at the waterline, prying rocks until one yields a small crab, slow and pale from cold. You hesitate, then drop it in the basket. The man beside you finds a cluster of mussels, shells chipped and dull. "Boil them," he says. "Boil everything." Oddly, old Norwegian records tell of pirates surviving winters almost entirely on seaweed. They learned to dry it, grind it, boil it into broth. Locals first laughed, then copied when snows grew too long. Turns out the sea, however stingy, offers enough to live, if you're humble enough to take what it gives. Ice cracks faintly beneath your boots. You move carefully, searching between rocks. The tide is low, open pools shimmer with trapped life, tiny fish, limpets, snails clinging to stone. You gather what you can with numb, clumsy fingers. The smell of salt and rot fills the air, but after weeks of bland stew, even that feels like hope. There's still no consensus on how often pirates relied on shore foraging during frozen voyages. Some maritime historians claim such expeditions were rare and risky. Others insist they were essential when trade routes iced over. Truth likely varies with every coastline, every storm, every starving crew. You find a gull's egg smashed on the rocks, frozen solid. You pocket it anyway. Behind you someone shouts, he spotted something glinting beneath the ice. A fish trapped when the tide fell. Together you chip it free, laughing through chattering teeth. It's small and tough, but still a miracle. By noon the baskets are half full. The sun hangs low and pale. The party gathers driftwood for a fire, though most is soaked. Smoke rises in thin, reluctant streams. Someone jokes it smells like victory. The cook, who came despite his age, crouches by the flames, boiling seawater with shells and fish inside. The smell is strong and sharp. One curious note from a Flemish monk's diary describes meeting shipwrecked sailors who cooked soup from boiled seaweed and bird bones. He wrote it tasted of salt and grace. You feel the same now, holding a rough bowl to your lips while steam clouds your face, the broth scalding your tongue, yet you drink greedily, swallowing sea and smoke together. When the pot is empty, everyone sits quiet. No one speaks for a while. The cold feels gentler now, hunger less cruel. You watch snow drift across the rocks and think how strange it is that survival can taste so raw, so clean. When the boat pushes off again, you look back at the shore. It looks almost peaceful, untouched by time. But you know better. Every inch of that coastline remembers desperate hands that once scraped its stones. And now life. Back aboard, men carry the catch below. The cook sorts it, muttering to himself, already planning tomorrow's meal. The captain watches from above, face unreadable. He knows this small harvest buys only a little time. Still, time is something. Wind rises again, moaning through the rigging like a voice. You pull your cloak tight and lean against the rail. The sky darkens, streaked violet and silver. Somewhere beyond the ice spring waits. But for now the sea holds you in its frozen grip. All you can do is breathe, wait, and believe tomorrow will bring something else to eat. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the waves rock your thoughts. The taste of the sea lingers on your tongue, bitter and comforting. Hunger is still there, but tonight it sleeps. The next morning begins with a whisper of snow on canvas sails. The ship drifts lazily in slow current, half frozen, half free. You stand at the rail, breath fogging. The world feels still, holding its breath. Then far off a sharp crack splits the air. The lookout points to the horizon, wreckage. You follow the captain's gaze and see it too, pale ribs of a broken ship jutting through the ice. Even from here you can tell it's been there weeks, maybe longer. Timbers split, sails shredded, figurehead gone, yet the promise of food draws every eye on deck. By noon they lower a boat again. The sea sighs beneath it. Dark water slaps the sides. You pull your cloak tighter as the crew rows through floating ice shards, each glinting like glass in weak sun. When you reach the wreck, the first thing that hits is the smell. Old wood, brine, and something darker, like spoiled grain. You climb aboard carefully. Boots slip on frozen planks. The hulk groans beneath your weight. In the hold, barrels lie scattered like bones. Some split, spilling pale dust across the floor. You kneel and scoop a handful between your fingers. Flour, damp and clumped but recognizable. Sea records from the 10th century describe scavenging wrecks as common and dangerous. Taking goods from a lost ship risked angering local lords. Yet hunger cared nothing for laws. Many pirate crews survived entire winters raiding the remains of merchantmen that never reached port. You pry open another barrel, the smell makes your stomach twist. Salt fish turned slimy with rot. Flies buzz faintly at the edges even in this cold. You gag but keep searching. Hunger is patient, not polite. A sailor nearby shouts. He's found a crate of lemons, shriveled but intact. You laugh in near disbelief. The sharp scent cuts through the stench like sunlight. You bite one out of curiosity and wince at the sourness. Yet your body seems to crave it instinctively. Later generations would learn citrus prevents scurvy. But here in these frozen ruins, it's simply a miracle that something fresh still exists. A curious entry in an old log mentions a similar find. A cargo of Spanish oranges washed ashore months after a storm. The sailors who found them wept while eating, though the fruit was half rotten. You picture the scene now and understand completely. Deeper in the wreck you find another surprise, a sealed jar of honey, thick and dark but still edible. The cook opens it reverently, dipping a finger to taste. He closes his eyes, silent a moment, then nods. Good. Men pass it carefully around. Each takes the tiniest dab. The sweetness feels unreal, too soft, too alive for this place. Experts on sea life suggest honey was prized both as food and medicine aboard medieval ships. It kept forever, gave energy, masked the taste of spoiled rations. You understand why. For a few moments men almost seem human again, smiling, whispering, remembering sweetness. Then in the hold's rear you find a pitch-sealed barrel. The captain helps break it open. Inside are chunks of smoked pork, dark but still firm. The smell is strong but bearable. The cook tastes a piece, nods slowly. We can stretch this. Relief washes over the crew, almost wholly. Historians remain uncertain how much of pirate life was scavenged and how much stolen outright. Some evidence suggests a complex code. Drifting wrecks were fair claim. Raiding a surviving ship was condemned. But at sea, morality bends with the wind. Tonight no one asks where this food came from. As you row back, light fades. The sky glows faint pink at the horizon, water beneath blackens. The wreck shrinks behind you, a ghost returning to its grave. You can't help feeling strange gratitude toward the dead sailors who once owned these stores. Their misfortune is your breath. Back aboard the cook begins sorting finds. Honey goes into a small jar, pork into a fresh brine barrel. Lemons are hung near the galley fire to dry slowly. You stand nearby watching him hum a tune that feels older than any chart. That night the food tastes almost festive. The stew has real flavor again, faint but present. Someone tells of another wreck they once found laden with eastern spices, pepper, cloves, cinnamon, treasures worth more than silver. You imagine the sharp, warm scent mingling with cold sea air. Wind howls outside, but it no longer feels like an enemy. The fire crackles softly. The sweetness of honey still lingers on your tongue. You think how every scrap of food here was borrowed from someone or something that didn't survive. A grim truth, yet somehow sacred. Before sleep you gaze at the black horizon. Somewhere beyond drift new wrecks, new ghosts waiting in the deep. You whisper quiet thanks to whom you're not sure and close your eyes. The ship rocks gently, carrying you into dreams that smell faintly of salt, smoke, and honey. Morning comes soft and gray, fog thinning, a weak drizzle making the deck slick and shining. You smell smoke rising from the galley again, but this time mingled with something unfamiliar, spices, maybe, or hope. The cook stirs the pot with new care, as if afraid to wake the ghosts of the broken ship that gave this food. The captain leans on the rail, eyes fixed on distant shore. A village lies beyond those hills, its chimneys trailing faint smoke in the mist. You know what he's thinking: food, trade, perhaps even warmth. But the villagers won't welcome you with open arms. Pirates and honest folk share a language only when hunger forces it. The crew gathers, whispering. One suggests landing at night, another argues daylight when villagers are less likely to panic. Debate rises until the captain raises a hand. "We trade, not raid," he says. "If they give, we take with thanks. If not, we starve." Heavy silence follows, but no one objects. Contemporary reports from North Sea coastal communities describe such uneasy exchanges. Fishermen meeting strangers whose faces they didn't know, trading flour for rum, bread for salt, dried fish for nails and cloth. Sometimes it ended in smiles, sometimes knives. Hunger has its own diplomacy. You row ashore with a few others. The boat cuts cold water reflecting gray sky. The village appears slowly, built of stone and driftwood. Smoke curls from roofs. Dogs bark as you near. A man with a spear steps forward, suspicion carved on his face. The captain raises both hands and speaks low, calm. "We have goods to trade: salt, rope, a little cloth." The villagers watch. Then an old woman emerges, wiping hands on her apron. She studies your faces, sees hunger, and nods once. Inside her cottage, the air is warm and smells of baking bread. You can barely stand it. The sight of loaves rising by the fire tightens your chest. She sets one on the table, then points to the bundle you carry. The captain opens it, small jar of honey and a strip of smoked pork from the wreck. Her eyes widen. Honey is worth gold here. She nods slower this time and gestures to the bread. The exchange is silent but clear. She slices the loaf, steam billowing, and divides it. The crust cracks. The inside is soft as clouds. When you bite, it feels unreal. Warmth spreads thick and heavy. Old chronicles from northern France mention villagers quietly trading with sea raiders in winter, choosing survival over loyalty to the crown. They risked charges of treason, but hunger silenced politics. Perhaps this woman has done such deals before. One curious tale from a Breton fishing town tells of a pirate who traded his pistol for a sack of turnips and a wool blanket. The villagers later displayed the weapon as proof mercy was worth more than steel. No one knows what became of the man, but the story outlived centuries as a parable of quiet humanity. You sit in the corner chewing slowly. The bread sticks to your teeth and tastes divine. The cook mutters he could live forever with an oven like this. The woman gives a faint smile, perhaps amused, perhaps sad. She hands each man a small cloth bundle before you leave. Salt cod, dried herbs, a few onions. You bow your head in thanks. Maritime trade experts still debate whether such deals were common or rare. Some say pirates were too feared for peaceful approach. Others believe these small acts of exchange were vital to both sides. Without them, entire crews might perish, and isolated villages starve when their own catch failed. Back at the shore, you push the boat into the surf again. The sky has cleared a little. Sunlight breaks through in thin golden blades. You glance back once. The woman stands on the hill, arms crossed, watching you leave. For a moment she looks almost carved from the sea itself, weathered but unbroken. Aboard ship, the crew gathers to see the bundles. The cook smiles like a child. He slices onions and drops them in the pot. The smell fills the air. Someone starts an old shanty, slow and mournful. Even the captain looks lighter, shoulders less tense. That night you eat stew rich with flavor for the first time in weeks. Onion and cod mingle with smoke and salt. It feels like a miracle disguised as supper. The crew falls quiet afterward, content and heavy. The cook wipes his hands and says softly, "Maybe not all landfolk hate us." You think again of the woman, her calm eyes, her silent kindness. Outside, the sea sighs against the hull, gentle now, almost tender. You lie down full this time and listen to your crewmates. Voices fade into sleep. As you drift off, you picture her cottage on the hill, the smell of bread, the faint glow of her fire against the night. Somewhere out there life still feels warm. The following days blur into cold fog and gray sky. The village food stretches farther than anyone expected. The cook parcels it out with quiet precision, every bowl measured, every portion a lesson in patience. Still, all know it will soon be gone. Hunger has a way of counting days even when no one else does. On the fifth morning, the lookout spots smoke on the horizon. A small lone merchantman struggles against the current. The captain studies it long through his glass. Finally, he speaks. "They have food. We don't." The words settle heavy on deck. It begins without shout or drum. The crew moves as one creature, trained and tired. They hoist sail, trim lines, point the ship into the wind. The sea churns beneath the hull, spraying cold foam across your face. Your hands shake on the rope, fear or anticipation, you can't tell. According to surviving logs, winter raids were rare but not unheard of. Merchant ships slowed by ice became easy marks, though risks were high. Cold killed almost as efficiently as cannon fire, but hunger makes brave men of fools. As you close, you see the other ship list slightly. It limps along, its crew moving sluggishly. Exhausted, perhaps starving too. For a moment, pity flickers in your chest. Then the captain raises his hand and pity vanishes. Grappling hooks fly, thudding into wooden rails. Men swarm across the gap. Boots skid on frozen planks. The fight is short. The merchants surrender quickly, faces hollow, eyes dark with resignation. No one has strength for heroics in winter. Inside, the hold barrels wait like treasure chests. The cook cracks one open and the smell of wheat floods the air. Flour, clean and dry. Another holds salt beef, pale and firm, perfectly packed. Men cheer quietly, too tired to shout. The cook drops to his knees almost in prayer. An old naval report notes pirates often spared ships that surrendered without fight, taking only food and fuel. Strange, but the sea makes men practical. Killing wastes energy. Mercy saves time. You wonder, is this mercy dressed as hunger? Among the goods you find something unexpected, a small wooden chest filled with bright red powder. The captain sniffs and sneezes violently. "Pepper," he laughs. "Real pepper." Men grin at each other, already dreaming of taste. A curious detail from a Venetian spice journal mentions stolen pepper could be worth more than silver in northern ports. It flavored everything from soup to medicine. For sailors, it masked age and salt. Tonight it will do the same for you. The cook works fast, mixing flour with melted snow for dough, slicing beef thin. Pepper goes in by handfuls. The smell fills the ship, rich, heady, almost intoxicating. After months of bland food, someone starts humming again. The same low melody that always rises when hope returns. Some researchers claim raids like this blurred the line between theft and trade. Crews often took what they needed and offered gold or labor in return. though not always fairly. In the end, survival rarely cared for justice. You eat that night in silence. The stew is sharp, full of warmth. Pepper burns your tongue, but you keep eating until the bowl is clean. For a moment, taste brings back memories you thought lost: warm kitchens, full tables, laughter that didn't sound afraid. After the meal, the captain gathers the crew. "We took enough," he says. "No more." He looks to the dark horizon. "Let the sea keep its balance." You're not sure if it's prayer or warning. Later, you help toss a few small sacks of grain back to the merchant ship before cutting her loose. The gesture feels strange, almost tender. Men on the other deck wave weakly, lantern light on their faces. One shouts something you can't make out. You raise your hand anyway. As sails fill again and your ship slips into darkness, silence returns. The sea hums softly beneath you, as if approving. The cook hides the remaining pepper like treasure, wrapping it in cloth, promising it will last. That night, as wind dies, the ship feels warmer. Inside the galley, the air carries a trace of spice, faint but real. You breathe it in, eyes half closed, and for the first time in weeks you almost forget the cold. The sea grows restless again, slapping the hull in uneven rhythm. The gray horizon looks heavy, as if the sky might fall into the water any moment. You wake to the clatter of pots and faint smoke. Below deck, the cook is already moving, muttering, trying to coax fire from damp wood. Cooking aboard has always been an act of defiance. The galley is a tiny box wedged near the stern, little more than iron plates and soot-black walls. You crouch beside him, watching him feed bits of rope fiber into the coals. Flame flickers, then dies. He sighs and rubs his hands. "Won't catch," he says quietly. Records from early naval expeditions describe cooking at sea as both necessity and danger. Fire and wood don't mix well with salt and pitch. Some ships banned open flame entirely, forcing crews to eat cold rations for weeks. Others risked it, knowing one spark could end everything. You look at the glow before you and think how thin the line really is. At last, the cook coaxes a trembling orange flame that throws his shadow long across the wall. He sets the pot over it and pours seawater mixed with the last handful of flour. The air fills with the sound of bubbling water. "Soup," he grins. You smile back, though your stomach knots at the thought. One curious discovery from wreck excavations shows sailors sometimes coated pots with clay to slow salt corrosion. The idea was brilliant but rarely worked. You can imagine the frustration: smell of burning fat mixed with sea air. Every meal a compromise. Fire hisses when a drop of seawater hits it. Sparks flare bright against the gloom. The cook swears softly, waving a rag to fan it. "Always a fight," he mutters. He reaches for a lump of salt beef, scraping off mold before dropping it in. The meat lands with a dull splash, and the rising smell is thick and heavy. French privateer logs describe sea stews that mixed everything edible in one pot: biscuit crumbs, dried peas, fish scraps, even coffee grounds for flavor. Less recipe, more ritual. The goal was warmth, not taste. You drink the broth now, and warmth slides down your throat like grace. Some researchers believe the act of cooking meant more than the food itself. It gave men something to gather around, a hearth in a world without land. You see it now. The crew huddles close, hands stretched to the small fire, faces soften in the dim light. The ship rocks gently, the pot rattles. Someone passes a crust softened in the stew. You chew slowly, trying not to lose a crumb. Salt burns your tongue, but you hardly mind. A curious anecdote from a sailor's letter describes how in storms cooks sometimes lashed pots with rope to keep them from flying. The letter ends with a quiet joke. "That night we ate more rope than soup." You smile, imagining laughter cutting through thunder and fear. Outside, wind rises again. You hear waves slap harder. The cook braces, gripping the counter as the ship heels. The pot nearly slides before he catches it with a shout. Men laugh nervously. "Not giving supper to the sea," he says, still clutching the handle. Later, when the storm finally eases, you all eat together in silence. The soup is thin but warm. Its steam fills the air like breath. For a moment you feel almost safe. The glow of fire, the rhythm of spoons against tin bowls, it becomes survival's lullaby. Academic historians still debate whether pirates had designated cooks or shared duties. Some claim larger ships carried skilled cooks taken from prizes. Others say the title rotated with luck and stamina. Watching your own cook now, singed hair, soot-streaked face, you think it takes a special soul to feed others in hell. When the last bowl is empty, the fire dies. The cook wipes his hands on his apron and sits quietly, staring at the embers. The smell of smoke clings to everything: clothes, hair, even dreams. You close your eyes and breathe it in, letting it settle deep. Above deck, the wind shifts. Stars appear one by one, faint and trembling. Somewhere beyond the dark waves, another ship may be brewing its own strange stew. Another crew huddled against the same cold. The thought oddly comforts you. You are not alone in your hunger. You finish the last sip of broth, feel warmth spread through your chest, and lean back against the wall. The ship rocks gently. The pot cools beside you. The fire fades to soft red coals. For the first time in days, your belly feels heavy enough for sleep to find you. The next dawn comes slow and silver. The air feels a little softer, the wind less cruel. You climb on deck and breathe the smell of salt and smoke clinging to morning. The crew moves quietly, half asleep, boots thudding on wet planks. Down below, the cook is humming again, and a new smell drifts up, sweet, sharp, warm. When you enter the galley, he holds a small pouch. Its contents glow faintly orange in the light. "Cinnamon," he grins. "Found it in one of the stolen crates." He opens the pouch and the scent instantly fills the room. It smells of distant markets, places where the very air feels rich. You breathe deep, and for a moment the cold retreats. Late medieval spice merchants. Records show pirates often stumbled on cargoes whose value they barely understood. Cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, citrus, among the most precious loads. Sometimes crews kept them for trade. Sometimes they used them in wild experiments with food and drink, just to feel civilized again. The cook dusts a pinch into a pot of thin porridge. The scent transforms it, making even hunger elegant. You dip your spoon and taste. The sweetness surprises you, gentle but real. It tastes of another life when food was more than survival. Curiously, a preserved letter from a Dutch privateer's wife mentions sending him oranges and dried ginger before a winter voyage. She believed warm flavor would shield him from cold. Historians now think she meant scurvy, though she never knew the word. Still, her care carried truth. A little warmth goes far at sea. Men gather closer, drawn by the smell. Someone jokes the cook must have stolen a merchant's wife to make anything smell so good. Laughter ripples through the room. Even the captain smiles faintly from the doorway, arms crossed. Light catches the faded gold braid on his coat, dull with salt but still proud. The cook ladles steaming liquid into cups. It's thin, almost tea made from dried peel and water. You sip, it's bitter but alive. Citrus, the cook explains. From the wreck, thought it might help. You nod. Your body feels grateful even if your tongue protests. Some sea medicine scholars note that long before vitamins were discovered, sailors instinctively knew sour fruit healed them. They didn't need science to see the difference between pallid skin and health. You look around and see it on your crewmates' faces, faint color returning, a spark in tired eyes. The cook sets aside a small bowl, saving some spice for later. Never use it all at once, he says quietly. Exotic taste is like gold. Spend it too fast and you forget its worth. You nod again, watching him fold the pouch carefully. A curious little note appears in the log of a captured pirate ship named La Fortuna. Among her prizes was a cargo of sugar and cocoa from the Caribbean coast. The crew reportedly mixed cocoa with seawater and suet to make a bitter drink. The chronicler called it an abomination, yet the pirates swore it gave them strength. You picture it now, chocolate's taste on a frozen deck. Strange and sacred. Even the roughest men crave sweetness when the world turns bitter. The captain begins speaking quietly to the crew. He tells them winds are shifting, that seas ahead may bring trade routes ripe for intercept. His words sound almost tender. He knows full bellies make sailors loyal. He also knows morale can keep men alive when rations cannot. Later, when the sun climbs higher, you go back on deck. The sky is pale gold laced with thin cloud. The air carries faint traces of cinnamon and smoke. You breathe it deep, letting warmth settle in your chest. Historians still argue how often pirates tasted luxury. Some say rare fleeting moments of decadence between storms and want. Others suggest spices and sweets were not just stolen goods, but symbols of defiance, reminders that even outlaws could enjoy kings' pleasures for one night. You look toward the horizon. The sea glimmers faintly while calm. Behind you, laughter drifts from the galley, soft and unguarded. For the first time in weeks, the ship feels less like a prison and more like home. You sit by the mast holding an empty cup. The scent of cinnamon still clings to your fingers. Wind hums gently through the rigging, almost caressing. You close your eyes and let yourself rest, imagining warm markets, orange groves, sunlit harbors you will never see. The ship creaks softly beneath you, steady and alive. For months the sea fed you bitterness, but today, just for a moment, it gives back sweetness. By evening, the sweetness of spice has faded, replaced again by the raw smell of salt and sweat. The warmth of that small miracle is gone, and the hold smells of what it truly is, a tomb for food and patience. You descend the ladder slowly, boots sinking into damp planks. The deeper you go, the stronger the stench. The hold is its own world, dim and breathing. Wooden barrels line the walls, some cracked, others weeping slow trickles of fat. The air thickens as you move between them. The smell of rot, salt, and old meat wraps around you like smoke. Your stomach knots, hunger or revulsion, hard to tell. Preserved naval logs described lower decks of medieval ships as places where food died. The mix of moisture, galley heat, and trapped air turned storerooms into slow ovens of decay. Even salted goods suffered. Butter turned green, meat softened into slime, bread sprouted things that should never live. You see it now faintly gleaming in lantern light. You crouch by a leaking barrel and hook out a piece of meat slick with slime. The smell makes you reel. You drop it fast and wipe your hands on your coat, though the grease never truly leaves. A 15th century traveler's diary describes sailors masking spoiled food with vinegar and spices just enough to swallow. You wonder if they knew they ate sickness, or if denial tasted better than hunger. The cook joins you, lantern in hand, eyes squinting through smoke. "Going bad faster than I thought," he mutters. "Cold keeps the air wet. Salt can't fight forever." He taps a barrel with his knife, listening to the hollow sound. 2 days, maybe 3 before it all turns. You nod, throat tightening. The thought of losing what little remains feels unbearable. He sighs, raising the lantern higher. Flame throws shadows on the walls, dark patches, crawling shapes, movement that might be rats or worse. Oddly, old testimony exists of pirates keeping cats aboard for this exact reason. The animals weren't pets. They were soldiers in the endless war against vermin. Some ships even listed them on the crew roster. You look around and almost wish for a cat's sharp eyes in this stinking dark. The cook finds a smaller barrel hidden behind others and cracks it open. Inside, onions, shriveled but still holding shape. He gives a faint grin. Little miracles. You help him lift it, carrying it toward the ladder. Each step groans like warning. When you reach deck, fresh air floods your lungs, sharp and clean. The cook wipes sweat from his brow. At least the stink stays below. You look at the sea and realize how deceptive open air can be. Up here the world is vast and pure. Down there it quietly festers, waiting to poison anyone who forgets to fear it. One strange artifact from an English brig's wreck was a small clay jar of dried mint leaves. Archaeologists suspect it was used to mask the hold's stench. Imagine a handful of herbs standing between sanity and madness. You almost smile, thinking how fragile comfort becomes when survival is the only measure of wealth. The captain descends from the helm, eyeing the cook. "How bad?" The cook hesitates, then tells the truth. The captain nods once. "Half rations again." A low murmur ripples across deck, but no one argues. Hunger has taught them silence saves strength. Some maritime historians still debate how captains managed rations during long winters. Some say democratically. Others insist tyranny disguised as order. Truth was likely both. The man who controls food controls every life aboard. You watch the crew line up for their small bowls of stew. That night the smell of rot clings to it, faint but undeniable. Some pinch their noses, others eat without blinking. You do the same, forcing it down. The body learns to obey hunger before taste. Outside, wind rises, rattling ropes like bones. The ship groans with motion, but the rhythm is almost soothing. You close your eyes a moment, breathing through your mouth, trying to forget the smell living beneath your feet. After supper, the cook tosses a handful of mint and onion skins into the fire. The scent sharpens, briefly cutting the damp air. He leans against the wall, eyes tired but calm. "Hunger doesn't kill," he says quietly. "The smell does. You stop believing in food." You nod after a while, not knowing what to say. The truth sits heavy between you. The sea doesn't starve you fast. It starves you slowly, turning food into fear. When you finally climb into your hammock, the air feels thick enough to chew. You breathe shallowly. The taste of smoke and rot still lingers on your tongue. Above, timbers creak, waves whisper, and the ship drifts through the night like a ghost searching for a place to forget its hunger. Morning comes in slow, uncertain light. The storm has passed, but the world it leaves behind feels drained of color. The sea is still patched with ice. Snow wears a thin glaze. You rise slowly, every joint aching, brushing frost from your lashes. The fire is out again, its ashes scattered by wind. The cook stands at the rail staring at the horizon, breath coming in short, cloudy bursts. Behind him, the captain kneels by the last stores, sacks nearly empty. You can now see barrel bottoms that once held flour, the cracked lid of the salt box, the greasy shadow where oil used to be. The cook speaks without turning. "We can't stay here." His voice is quiet but carries across the still air. "Nothing left to take from the island. We have to find people." The captain nods slowly. "Somewhere south there might be a port," he says. "Small one, I've heard rumors." Small ports and hidden markets dotted medieval Europe's coasts, places where smugglers and fishermen traded far from royal taxes or church eyes. Some were mere caves with torches and rough tables. Others grew into whole underground towns thriving in secret. You know, if such a place still exists, it may be your only chance. The crew loads the boat again, what's left of it. Wood groans as it touches frozen water. You push off from shore. Ice cracks beneath. Wind is sharp but not cruel, carrying a scent that faintly hints of smoke and tar. Civilization must be close. Hours pass before you see it, a thin curl of gray rising beyond a rocky point. Real smoke, warm and alive. The captain's eyes narrow. "Keep low," he says. "We don't know who they are." As you round the rocks, the sight unfolds slowly. A cluster of huts at the water's edge, roofs thick with snow, chimneys alive with smoke. Lanterns hang from poles, casting small pools of light on the ice. People in heavy coats move between buildings carrying baskets, crates, barrels. You realize this is no village, it's a market. A document found in Bruges archives describes such places as shadow ports where pirates, smugglers, and desperate merchants met when seas froze. They sold anything they could steal or salvage: barrels of grain, dried fish, cured hides, even stolen church candles. The line between sinner and merchant blurred in the cold. You pull the boat closer. A man approaches wrapped in fur, beard white with rime. His eyes study you all carefully, then he nods once. "You've come far," he says. "Coin or trade?" The captain answers simply, "Trade." He gestures to the few goods: rolls of cloth, remnants of a silver chain, and one small pouch of pepper the cook has guarded since the raid. The man weighs the pepper pouch in his palm, expression unreadable, then nods. "Fair." He pushes baskets toward you. "You'll need warmth more than gold." Records from similar markets mention some traders pitied starving crews while others preyed on them. Historians still argue whether these places were acts of mercy or greed. Watching this exchange, you feel both truths at once. The cook kneels by the baskets, touching each item as if confirming it's real. He lifts a piece of bread to his nose, inhales deep, then hands it to you first. "Eat," he says quietly. "You found the smoke." You bite. The crust is rough on your teeth and the taste floods your senses. Coarse and heavy but alive. You look around and notice other small boats arriving, faces wrapped, hands trembling. All drawn by hunger, all carrying something to trade. The market hums with quiet desperation, a place built entirely on need. As the sun begins to set, the trader's wife hands the cook a small pot. "From my own fire," she says, "for your strength." Inside is melted fat, smooth and pale. He bows his thanks, eyes shining. When you return aboard, the air feels warmer though the temperature hasn't changed. The fire burns bright again. The smell of fat and bread rises through the galley. Men eat in silence. No songs, no jokes, only gratitude too large for words. An old poem by an anonymous sailor speaks of this place. In winter's dark mercy wears a mask, and trade becomes prayer. You repeat the line quietly to yourself, finishing the meal. Later you step on deck. Stars glimmer faintly through haze. Far behind the hidden port still glows with its small lights, a pocket of light in a world made of cold. You imagine the traders clearing tables, counting coins, whispering prayers for the next ship sure to come. You stand there a long time, the taste of bread still on your tongue. The sea moans softly beneath you, carrying your ship back into darkness. But for the first time in weeks, you no longer fear what lies ahead. The fire burns low in the galley, an even orange pulse on the walls. The air smells of salt, fat, and something faintly sweet. The crew moves quietly, each man wrapped in his own thoughts. Outside, the sea moans beneath its skin of ice. You sit near the cook holding a tin cup of liquid that gleams like syrup in lantern light. "Rum," he says, pouring you more. "Frozen solid when I found it. Took half an hour to thaw." You bring it to your lips and taste fire. It hits like warmth and smoke together, spreading down your throat until your chest aches. The others drink in silence. Each swallow cuts the cold from inside. For a moment you feel human again. In captured pirate logs, rum appears again and again, not just drink but ritual. Medicine, currency, comfort, courage. They called it liquid fire, a name that fit too well. Sailors drank it to dull, cold, blunt hunger, forget what they couldn't change. You understand now why it was guarded more fiercely than gold. The cook pours himself a small measure and raises his cup. "To the living," he says quietly. Men echo him, voices low and rough. The sound fades into the creak of the hull, the ship's steady heartbeat. An English privateer once wrote that rum could fool a man into warmth long after his body stopped feeling it. He claimed it made him dream of summer even in snow. You wonder, is that illusion mercy or cruelty? As warmth spreads, your mind loosens, thoughts drifting free of cold. The captain joins the circle, steps slow but sure. He drinks without expression, then wipes his mouth with the back of a gloved hand. "Keep your heads," he says quietly. "Rum gives warmth but steals sense just as fast." Men nod, though some already smile more freely than they should. One curious note from an early medical treatise claims diluted rum mixed with lemon zest was prescribed for frostbite and despair. The author called it a drink of courage disguised as medicine. You think of that while the cook adds more zest to the pot, stirring slowly, the scent rising sharp and bright, cutting the gloom. A few younger sailors start humming. Their voices are uneven but warm. The tune drifts through the air, wrapping the fire. You lean back, eyes half closed, the world softening at the edges. Historians studying sea culture often argue whether drink helped or harmed sailors through long winters. Some call it escape, others endurance. Truth lies somewhere between. Rum could be poison or salvation depending on how much you needed to forget. The cook refills cups though the rum is nearly gone. "Last of it," he says. "Drink slow." You take another sip. The warmth feels different this time, gentler. It fills your chest like memory rather than fire. A sailor across the table chuckles softly, eyes glassy. "Funny thing," he says. "This stuff doesn't warm the body. It just convinces the soul the body's fine." Everyone laughs quietly, but the sound dies fast. No one wants to think too hard about the truth in his words. As the fire burns down, you watch the glowing coals. Red light flickers like a tiny sun reflected in the rum still clinging to your cup. The smell of smoke mingles with sweetness and salt. You take one more small sip, holding it on your tongue until it almost burns. A forgotten line from a sailor's song comes to you then. Rum for the bones, wind for the soul, and mercy for morning. You whisper it without thinking. The cook looks at you and nods slowly, as if the words are older than either of you. Outside, wind rises again, sweeping the ship in long sighing breaths. Waves slap gently at the hull, and somewhere below ice cracks with a sound like distant thunder. You listen half asleep, rum humming in your veins. Before the crew sleeps, the captain gives a quiet order. Let the fire burn tonight. No one sleeps cold. The cook nods and tosses another handful of wood on the flames. Light flares brighter for a moment, painting the walls gold. You curl into your blanket, still tasting the last drop of rum on your tongue. The ship creaks softly, rocking in the sea's rhythm. The warmth filling you now feels almost real, and even if it's borrowed, it's enough. The fire mutters, men breathe, and the ocean sings one low, endless note beneath it all. You close your eyes, letting false warmth carry you into dreams where the water is calm and the night never ends. Night slips away quietly, leaving a sky the color of dull steel and a sea that whispers rather than roars. You wake to the faint twang of a rough homemade string instrument. The sound is fragile but real. When you open your eyes, you see the youngest sailor sitting by the galley fire, plucking a lute with cold, cracked fingers. The melody is soft, lilting, almost mournful. The cook stands nearby, smiling faintly, stirring morning broth. The smell of bread and smoke drifts in the air. For a moment it almost feels like home, though the deck still groans under ice and wind still bites through your coat. People always think pirates lived only for gold, for blood, for the next raid. But hunger and cold teach a different truth. What truly keeps a crew alive is distraction, music, stories, laughter. Even a well-told lie can make a man breathe one more day. You drink your cup of warm liquid and listen to the melody. It wavers, then steadies, becoming something closer to dance. The others begin tapping spoons against their bowls. A dull rhythm fills the space. The sound echoes through the rigging and across empty sea. One note in an English surgeon's journal describes ships locked in winter ice staging mock feasts. Men sat around empty plates singing and describing imaginary banquets in lavish detail. Part joke, part prayer. You almost hear the same game starting now. The cook suddenly grins. "Tonight," he says loudly, "we dine like lords. Roast pheasant with almonds, sweet pies, apples steeped in honey." Men laugh. One answers, "Don't forget the wine." The captain insists on the finest vintage. Another adds, "and cream enough to drown in." The galley fills with laughter, shaky but alive. A small note from a Venetian ship's log mentions sailors sometimes held mock banquets not just to pass time, but to keep jaws and tongues active during long hunger. Turns out the mind feeds the body more than you think. The captain appears in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. "If anyone finds a real apple," he says, "I'll trade him my hat." That sparks another round of laughter, louder this time. The sound feels new, unfamiliar after so many weeks of silence. The young sailor begins an old song about a fisherman who cheated death by pretending to be full. His voice is thin but clear. You find yourself humming before realizing you know the tune. The melody weaves around the clink of spoons. the hiss of fire, the slow pulse of waves. According to a scholar of sea folklore, many sailor songs were written not for work or prayer, but for survival. They were ways to breathe together, reminders that the crew was one body, not many. Listening, you understand. The song's rhythm feels like a heartbeat shared among you all. The cook joins in, tapping the pot lid like a drum. The sound echoes through the ship. Someone whistles off-beat, another stamps his foot, and for a few shining minutes the cold loses its grip. The ship feels warm again, alive again. When the song ends, laughter follows, then silence. The cook ladles the last of the broth and says quietly, "Not pheasant, but it'll do." You take your portion still smiling. The warmth of soup and music together feels like armor. An old superstition written in a sailor's prayer book margin. Sing before sleep and hunger will pass you by. The words come to mind. Leaning against the wall, listening to the fire crackle, you wonder who first said them and whether they believed. Later that night, the crew gathers again, this time without instruments or spoons. They sit close, trading stories. Some tell jokes from home, others recall battles and storms. One man recites a poem about the sea swallowing kings and beggars alike. The rhythm of his voice fills the silence. A modern historian once called these stories oral rations. They fed the mind when the body had nothing left. You think of the phrase now and realize how right it sounds. Laughter, song, shared lies, all a kind of food. When the fire dies, no one hurries to hammocks. The silence that follows feels softer, more peaceful. You look at the glowing coals and feel warmth that comes not from flame, but from voices still faintly echoing in your ears. Outside, the sea murmurs quietly, its tone less harsh. You lie down, eyes heavy. The song's rhythm still hums in your chest. The last thought before sleep comes easily. Hunger remains, but music guards the soul. Morning begins quietly, light fog rolling across the sea. The ship drifts on slow swells. Ropes creak like whispers. You wake to find the air warmer, not by much, but enough that frost on the rail has softened into water drops. The cold is easing, if only for a moment. The cook is already up, crouched by the fire measuring what remains of stores. His lips move silently as he counts. This time there is no despair on his face, only calculation. He catches your eye and gives a faint smile. "We've learned the rhythm of this winter," he says. "Now we learn to plan the next." At first it seems absurd to think of another winter barely surviving this one, but his tone is steady. It reminds you of something deeper than optimism: endurance. Records from northern fleets describe how sailors began rationing more cleverly after enduring one brutal winter. They dried herbs along the rigging, sealed fish in oil, even stored seawater in barrels to evaporate later for salt. Necessity turned them into engineers. Watching the cook now, you see the same transformation. He begins teaching others what he's learned. Small garden boxes still live, their green shoots trembling in the wind. "Half we dry, half we eat," he says. "If they can survive the cold, so can we." Men listen, expressions somewhere between disbelief and awe. One sailor suggests sewing small sacks for dried seaweed and onion. Another proposes storing snow in sealed barrels to melt later for drinking water. Each idea builds on the last, small pieces of wisdom forming something larger. For the first time in months, you feel the ship thinking again. A journal from the early 15th century, written by a merchant sailor, records a similar shift in tone. We stopped waiting for mercy and began making it. His crew survived the next winter better than the first. You think of that line now, how mercy can be built one clever habit at a time. The cook begins setting new routines. Each morning, one man scrapes frost from deck to melt for washing. Another tends the plants. Two more check ropes for salt damage and knot nets where fish may pass when water clears. The captain quietly approves, though you catch a ghost of pride in his eyes. The ship now feels more like a village than a vessel. Every man knows his small duty, and work fills hours once owned by hunger. You notice no one complains anymore. There is no energy for despair, only motion. A curious note from a Scandinavian chronicle mentions that after the worst winters, pirate crews often became surprisingly orderly. They shared rations fairly, repaired ships carefully, even kept written tallies of stores. The chronicler wrote that hardship turned chaos into discipline faster than any law. Watching your own crew, now you understand it completely. At noon, the cook boils a small pot of broth from dried seaweed and salt. The taste is thin, but he adds a pinch of something new, bark ground between stones. It gives the soup a faint, sweet edge, and men eat in satisfied silence. You smile, realizing he's still experimenting, still searching for better ways to feed life itself. That evening, the captain gathers everyone on deck. The sea glows with reflected light. The sky is pale gold fading to silver. He speaks quietly, almost to himself. When the ice breaks, he says, we sail south again, but this time ready. We'll carry spring with us. His words pass through the crew like warmth. The idea of spring feels foreign, distant, yet it takes root. You picture garden boxes overflowing with green, air smelling of pine and wet earth, the taste of something fresh on your tongue. Some modern historians claim survival in sea winters depended less on resources than mindset. Crews that planned ahead, that found rhythm and order amid chaos, were the ones who lived. You feel that truth in every careful movement around you. The cook leans close and says quietly, if we hold long enough, this ship will remember what we did. Every plank is soaked with our patience. You believe him. Memory lives not only in people. It seeps into wood, into salt, into stories the tide carries. When night falls, you sit by the garden boxes watching tiny leaves tremble in the wind. The air smells faintly of seaweed and smoke, but beneath it something new, a hint of life pushing back against cold. You close your eyes and listen to the sea breathing around the hull. The rhythm feels different now, no longer threat but companion. The ship rocks gently and you think of the word the cook used earlier, rhythm. It feels right. Survival has become its own song. Wind hums softly through the rigging. You draw your blanket closer, feeling the pulse of waves beneath you. Stars shine overhead, sharp and countless. And for the first time in months, you let yourself believe spring really might come. Wine shifts again that night, carrying the faint scent of thawing earth. You wake to the sound of dripping water, slow, rhythmic, insistent. The ice that has held the ship captive for months is finally softening. The sound feels like a heartbeat returning to the world. The cook is already on deck, hands wrapped around a steaming tin mug. He looks up and smiles when he sees you. Listen, he says quietly. You listen. The steady drip becomes a song, uneven but hopeful. The sea is learning to move again. In logs of early northern explorers, this moment is always described the same way. The first melt, the sound of the ocean remembering itself. Men wept openly, laughed, or stood silent, afraid that celebrating too loudly might make the sea freeze again out of spite. You understand the feeling now. The captain orders sails checked, lines repaired. "We'll be ready when the ice breaks," he says. His voice is steadier, though weariness still hides beneath. Men move with quiet energy. Their breath clouds in the air. It's the first time in months you've seen them smile without effort. The cook prepares breakfast, thin porridge seasoned with the last dried greens from the garden boxes. The smell is faintly sweet, carrying memories of life. "Farewell meal for winter," he says. Men laugh quietly. You sit with your bowl. Warmth seeps into your hands. The taste reminds you of land you haven't seen in so long. A curious record from a Hanseatic merchant's log mentions crews celebrating the thaw by tossing bits of bread into the sea as offering. They called it the sea's share. The cook does the same now, tearing a small piece from a loaf and throwing it overboard. "For her patience," he says. By noon the sound of cracking ice echoes around the ship. Great sheets drift apart. Dark living water shows beneath. The crew cheers, voices hoarse and loud. You feel the ship breathe again, shifting with the current. For a moment you imagine the sea itself waking, stretching after a long, cold sleep. The cook sets a small pot on the fire and pours meltwater. He adds salt, seaweed, and a scrap of dried meat. "Soup for new beginnings," he mutters. The smell drifts through the air, mingling with the scent of thaw. Historians still debate whether these small ceremonies held real religious meaning or were simply acts of relief. But here, where faith and hunger speak the same language, the difference hardly matters. You see faith in every motion of the crew, in how they touch the ship's wood, how they whisper thanks to the wind. When the ice fully breaks, the ship begins drifting south. Sails flap weakly in the breeze. The captain stands at the wheel, face turned to faint sunlight, expression calm but hands gripping tight. The cook joins him for a moment, saying nothing. The two men stand side by side, listening to the creak and sigh of the sea. A note from a 15th century pilot book describes how men who survived brutal winters often carried a superstition: never eat your first spring meal in silence. They believed silence invited the cold back. Tonight the crew will not be silent. The cook works for hours, turning every scrap into something that feels like celebration. He dusts the last of the pepper, boils the remaining seaweed in meltwater until it glows faintly green, even fries small pieces of hardtack until they crackle. The air smells of life again. When the food is ready, men gather close around the fire. The captain lifts his bowl first. "To survival," he says simply. The others echo him, voices rough but steady. The cook smiles, hands trembling as he raises his own bowl. "To tomorrow," he adds. The first swallow burns with salt and smoke. It tastes of sea, patience, everything you've endured. Warmth spreads through your chest, carrying something heavier than hunger yet lighter than fear. Later, when light fades, you stand at the rail. Water flows free now, dark blue and endless. Stars begin to appear, scattered like seeds across the sky. For the first time in what feels like years, the world moves easily again. You hear the cook humming behind you, soft and low. The melody is unfamiliar, but its rhythm matches the sea's motion. You close your eyes and listen, letting the sound mingle with the whisper of waves against the hull. An old verse comes to you, though you can't recall where you heard it. "When ice forgets its name, the sea forgives hunger." You repeat it quietly. The words feel warm on cold air. Night deepens but no longer seems endless. You smell salt, hear water moving beneath the ship, feel wind carrying life again. The sea has remembered its song, and while you drift within it, you are alive and listening. Morning light spreads slowly. Pale shimmer slides across restless water. The air feels damp but no longer cruel, and a faint hum of melt fills silence like a heartbeat. You climb from your hammock and step on deck, feeling the ship tilt gently beneath your feet. The sea moves again, no longer an ice prison but a shifting path of gray and silver. The cook stands at the rail, lowering a bucket on a rope. He hauls it up and grins at the small flickers of movement inside. "Fish," he says quietly. "The sea remembers how to feed us." The words sound almost reverent. Fish is no longer just food now. It is miracle. The crew gathers, watching the cook tip the catch into a barrel. The soft slap of scales on wood echoes, and for a moment everyone smiles. Hunger has lost its teeth for the first time in months. In records of medieval fishing ships, this moment appears again and again. Sailors wrote how, when ice-melted fish returned like a kept promise, they called it the sea's forgiveness. You feel that forgiveness now, gentle and absolute. The cook works quickly, cleaning fish and setting some aside to dry in salt. The rest goes into a pot of boiling water with pinches of herbs from the little garden boxes. The rising smell is sharp and alive, drifting through the ship like sunlight turned to scent. One sailor hums while the soup cooks, a rhythm matching the slap of water on hull. The others join quietly. Their voices blend into something that feels like gratitude. A fragment from a Norwegian ballad speaks exactly of this act. When the first fish sings in the pot, the sea forgives winter. You whisper the line under your breath, half prayer, half memory. When the food is ready, the cook serves it in small wooden bowls. The broth glows faintly, surface slick with oil. You lift your spoon to your lips. The taste is clean, rich, bright, almost shockingly alive. After so long with dull flavors, you swallow and feel warmth spread through you deeper than any fire. The captain takes his bowl last. He eats in silence, then sets it down and looks to the horizon. "We move south again," he says. "We follow the thaw." Men nod, already trimming sails, movements smoother, lighter. Hope is its own fuel. Some chroniclers claim crews that survived brutal winters always spoke softer afterward, as if cold had taught them reverence. You feel that same quiet settling over everyone now. Even laughter sounds gentler. The cook finishes eating and begins cleaning his tools. You watch a moment before asking what he'll do with the dried fish. He smiles faintly. "Keep it," he says. "We owe the next storm a debt." His voice is calm, but you can tell he believes it. Later in the day, the water grows calmer. A few seabirds wheel overhead. Their cries are sharp and hopeful. The air smells cleaner, as if the whole world has been washed. The crew works together in silence, patching sails, checking lines, mending deck cracks. Every small task feels sacred. An old sea note from a Spanish port perfectly describes this transformation. After the thaw, every sound aboard becomes music, every action prayer. You hear it now. The thud of boots, creak of wood, flutter of canvas, all woven into living rhythm. The cook stands near the stern watching the waves. His face is tired but peaceful. "When we reach land," he says, "I'll plant something real, not in boxes, not on planks, something that can stay." You nod, picturing it. Green fields instead of gray waves, roots instead of ropes. The sky darkens as sun sinks low. The air is warm enough that no one hides below. Tonight men sit together, shoulders touching, breath visible in the dim light. Someone begins a story of a storm that swallowed a fleet and returned only one man who claimed the sea spoke to him in song. The others listen quietly, eyes on the horizon. The cook hums that same melody again. The captain closes his eyes, tapping the rhythm on his knee. You feel it too, this strange fragile calm that comes not from victory but endurance. When night fully settles, stars appear clean and sharp above the water. The ship slides gently over waves, no longer fighting, simply moving. You breathe deep, tasting salt, smoke, and something new: freedom. There's a saying written in an old sailor's notebook found in a wreck centuries later: the sea never forgets who loved her enough to survive her. You repeat the words quietly to yourself as the ship drifts south. You look one last time at the cook. His face is lit by firelight. He stirs the pot though it's empty, as if he just likes the sound. You smile, close your eyes, and let the sea's rhythm rock you. The thaw has come, and the story is not finished. The sea breathes gently tonight, a calm rhythm against the hull. The air is warmer. The sky is tinged faint pink. You stand near the bow, feeling the slow rise and fall beneath your feet. It's strange to realize how quiet hunger has become, how far away the cold now seems. The ship hums with quiet work, sails trimmed, lines coiled, voices calm. The cook on deck prepares what may be the last of the preserved fish. You follow the scent, a tender mix of salt, smoke, and herbs. When you reach the galley, he greets you with a smile that carries something close to pride. "We did it," he says. "We outlasted winter." The words hang in the air a moment. They feel heavier than joy, lighter than disbelief. You sit by the small fire watching the pot bubble. The sound of boiling water fills the silence, steady and comforting. In one of the oldest known traveler's diaries, written by a sailor returning from Iceland, there is a passage about this same feeling. He wrote that when the first warmth returned, his crew laughed and wept together, not because they were safe, but because they had become part of the sea itself. You think you understand now what he meant. The cook ladles soup into bowls, hands steady. He adds a few green leaves from the tiny plants that survived their boxes, then sets your bowl before you. The taste is mild, simple, familiar. Salt no longer burns your tongue. It feels like memory. Around you, men eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it might be their last. Some close their eyes while chewing, others whisper thanks. This time there is no laughter, only quiet contentment. The captain stands near the door, watching the scene with a small, weary smile. An old record from a monastery near the Breton coast tells of sailors who, after long winters at sea, observed 3 days of silent meals upon returning to land. They said words were too small for gratitude. You wonder if you'll feel the same urge when your feet touch earth again. After the meal, the cook cleans his tools carefully, deliberately. "We'll have enough dried fish to reach the next port," he says. "Maybe even enough to trade." His eyes shine in the firelight. The man who once scraped mold from barrels now speaks of trade as if he has rediscovered the language of the living. Some researchers studying sea psychology suggest the hardest part of survival is not the suffering itself, but what comes after, the silence that follows endurance. The human mind, they say, struggles to believe in peace. You feel that unease now, quiet but real. The captain calls everyone on deck at sunset. The horizon burns gold. Waves shimmer like hammered copper. He says nothing for a long time, only watches the water. Finally, tomorrow we sail for land. Maybe we find a village, maybe not, but we sail until we do. Men nod, wind tugging gently at their coats. The cook places a hand on the rail and whispers something that sounds like blessing. His words are carried away by the sea before you catch them. A small, strange moment passes. Then a single bird lands on the mast, shakes its feathers, looks toward the horizon, and cries once. The sound is so sharp and clean every man on deck falls silent. The cook smiles. "Spring's messenger," he says. "She tells us we're forgiven." You stay there until the sky deepens to violet. The first stars tremble overhead, faint and shaking. The sea glows faintly in their reflection. You breathe deep, filling your lungs with air that smells of salt and promise. Historians still write of seafarers' resilience, how they endured storms and hunger with courage beyond understanding. But they rarely speak of this moment, the silence after struggle, when life feels both too large and too fragile to touch. You close your eyes and let the sound of waves settle around you. The ship rocks gently, wood warm beneath your palms. The cook's laughter drifts from below, soft and genuine. For the first time since this voyage began, you allow yourself to believe in tomorrow without fear. Wind sighs, steady and kind. Somewhere ahead, unseen but certain, land waits. The next morning rises clear and golden. Sun touches the sea like fire on glass, light dancing across the deck in waves of warmth. The crew wakes slowly, blinking at the brightness. You climb to the rail and look to the horizon. There it is at last, a dark line against pale sky. Land. At first no one speaks. The moment feels too sacred for words. Then, as wind catches the sails, a low murmur passes through the men, sound between disbelief and joy. The cook comes to stand beside you, eyes fixed on that dark line. "Bread and soil," he whispers. "Real food, real earth." His voice trembles with awe. In logs of returning sailors, this scene appears again and again. The first sight of land after endless sea. Some wrote they wept without meaning to. Others swore they smelled grass miles before reaching it. You understand why. Every sense in your body leans toward that horizon, craving not food but belonging. The captain stands at the wheel, steady and silent. His face is unreadable, but his hands tremble slightly on the wheel. Wind fills the sails, and the ship glides forward with grace it has not known in months. You feel the hum of returning life through every plank. The cook goes to the galley one last time. He lights the fire, though it's barely needed, and boils a small pot of water. From a hidden pocket, he draws the last handful of herbs, the final green things that survived winter. "For the end of the journey," he says. The scent rises bright and clean. A curious note from a 15th century journal mentions sailors always brewed tea or broth before stepping ashore again. They called it the taste between worlds. It marked the shift from survival to living. The cook hands you a cup. You drink slowly. Warmth spreads through you like sunlight under your skin. As the ship nears shore, land details take shape. Low hills, dark forest, a thin strip of sand. You hear birds crying faintly in the distance. The sound pierces your chest with something like gratitude. Historians often describe this moment as rebirth. They say the sea takes everything from a man, strength, pride, even his sense of time, and returns it in pieces when he survives. You feel that truth now in your bones, in your breath. The ship runs gently aground. Wood sighs as it meets earth. Men move slowly, as if afraid the land might vanish if they step too hard. The captain orders the anchor dropped, his voice steady again. Then he looks at the cook. "You first," he says. "You kept us alive." The cook hesitates, then steps down onto the sand. He drops to his knees and presses his hands to the ground. His eyes close. "Warm," he says in near disbelief. The others follow. Laughter rises through weariness. Some kneel, some shout, some simply lie down. You stand still a moment. Wind wraps around you like an embrace. A fragment of forgotten sailor poetry speaks of this feeling. To breathe land air after salt is to be born again. You breathe deep and it feels true. The air smells of pine and soil, not smoke and brine. The cook begins unpacking small things: pot, knife, scrap of cloth. He finds a patch of level ground and plants the last surviving seeds from the ship's garden box. "For the next hungry soul who lands here," he says quietly, "let the earth remember us kindly." You help him pat the soil, tamping it gently. The sky above feels endless now. No longer something to fight, but something to rest beneath. The others gather driftwood and light a fire. Soon the smell of roasting fish drifts again, but this time it smells of feast, not survival. The captain sits apart watching the horizon. After a while he speaks quietly, almost to himself. "The sea took all it wanted," he says, "and still it left us." You sit beside the cook while the fire crackles. He hands you the first piece of fish, perfectly crisp at the edges. You bite. It tastes of smoke, salt, and peace. Around you men eat in silence, their faces lit by flame and dawn. When the meal is done, the cook leans back and closes his eyes. "We did it," he mutters. "That's all a story needs." The captain nods once. "A story worth remembering," he says. Before the sun climbs higher, the sea glitters behind you, endless and patient. Waves lap softly at the sand, neither cruel nor hungry, simply breathing. You feel that rhythm settle inside you, the pulse that carried you through every storm. You know that someday when someone asks what pirates really ate to survive brutal winters, the truth will sound simple: salt and faith, hunger and luck. But you will remember the taste of warmth after the thaw, the sweetness of survival, the silence of a full heart, and the sound of water forgiving the shore. You close your eyes, the world steady beneath you, the sea whispering quietly in the distance. The journey is over, but its memory lives, not in wind and waves where hunger once lived and now sleeps peace. Now the story softens, edges fading into silence. You sit with the image of that fire still glowing on the sand. The sound of waves no longer cruel but kind. The world around you slows, light melts into gold. Breathe once deep. The air is gentle now. No more frost, no more hunger, only the steady rhythm of tide and the faint rustle of foam curling over the shore. The cook is somewhere still humming quietly, tending the small green shoots he planted. The captain's shadow stretches long across the sand. Everything feels calm. Let the sound of the sea fill the space around you. Imagine water rolling in and out, washing away the last traces of hardship. Each wave carries a little warmth, a little sleep. The sky dims, the horizon softens, and the world seems to hold its breath with you. You can almost taste salt in the air, the kind that no longer stings but soothes. You feel the earth beneath you, solid and forgiving, gently holding you. The ship rests quietly nearby. Its sails slack, its purpose fulfilled. It creaks like an old lullaby. Now your eyes grow heavy. Wind dies, the fire glows faint, the sea murmurs one last promise, that tomorrow will come gentle and bright, and hunger will be only a story. Sleep now, wanderer of tides. You are warm, you are full, the ocean is calm.